Hi there. I've got this production that I'm working on right now, and I just wanted to show you really quickly what sort of things I have going on with the drums and how I've made the most of what I have to work with to get a pretty good sound, something that is nice and warm, and it's got a lot of softness, a lot of ambience to it, and it's a lot of fullness. And I'll show you a little bit of the track that it's going on.
You put me at ease. I know you feel likewise. I'm happy from here, liking you from far away. I'm happy from here, just to know that you're okay. And if it ever warmed your heart, just to know I think of you. If you're happy, then I'm happy, liking you from far away. I like to feel that spark in.
Okay, so we've got a couple of things going on here. I have two sort of sets of drums that I'm using. One of them is just your regular drum kit, which is using Drum Kit Designer in Logic. And what I've done is I've made that plugin multi-output instead of stereo. And what that's done is it's let me separate kick drum, snare drum, toms, hi-hat / percussion. That's kind of the most that plugin will let you do. But that lets me control individual elements of that drum set a little bit better. And then the other drum set I have going on is this orchestral kit. And it's just using the sampler plugin that Logic has. But essentially, if I play notes on the keyboard, you've got all the various sounds within that kit. It's a very traditional orchestral kit. And I'm only using a couple of sounds from that, and I'll show you what I'm doing. So I've got this part that I started the track from.
With your words, you put me at ease.
I'm just going to isolate the orchestral kit. Okay, so in that orchestral kit, there is a swell, a cymbal swell, which is this. And I've also got a cymbal hit that's using mallets instead of a regular drumstick. And that's going to sound differently depending on how hard you hit it. And then once the drums come in, you've got this orchestral tom. Like that. And that's got a ton of reverb on it, as you can see, but I don't have that very loud in the mix so that it's not too washy with the reverb. It's more of just an accent over the main drums. And so the main drums, if I isolate those, this is what you'll hear. So that tom does have a lot of reverb on it. The rest of the kit does not have as much reverb. What I did here, I played these drums with a drum set to the right of me. You can't see on camera, but I played those drums with an electronic drum set, and that cymbal swell is actually me playing a bunch of hits, and it's layered with that cymbal swell that you heard from the orchestral kit. So if I just solo this is what it sounds like. And so I took the velocities of that swell and I adjusted what they look like this. So you can do this sort of thing, just adjust your velocity curve like that. I'm just using a right click to do that. So you can do that however you want. It helps with very linear, gradual slopes with velocity if that's what you want. So I've got that. I've got the cymbal swell from the orchestral kit, and I have the mallet cymbal. And to combine all three of them, it gives it kind of a nice layered sound.
You put me at ease. I know you feel likewise. I'm happy from here.
Now, obviously, the ideal thing would just be to have a real acoustic drum kit in here, all set up with mics. But sometimes you don't have that luxury, because if I did, I would just take mallets, do the cymbal swells separately, and do all that stuff manually, which is what I would prefer to do. But in this case, I didn't have that on hand, so I went this way. And some other things about this particular drum kit that are contributing to how it sounds. I am going to go back to this part and just play the drum set once that snare comes in.
I like to feel that spark in the space between hellos. A light in the dark until we have to.
Okay, so I'll break it down here by channel. This first channel here is what the main plugin is on. And by default, when you separate all the multi-outputs to different channels, that first channel that the main drum kit was on becomes your cymbals. Okay, so this is just the cymbals. If I isolate it, you'll hear that. Okay, so on the cymbals, I've got an EQ happening here. This area right here, right around high 2K, almost 3K, tends to be real just unpleasant sounding with a lot of cymbals. I had to cut that pretty aggressively there. I boosted a little bit of the air on these cymbals, and I cut out a bunch of the low rumbling that we don't need. And then there is a compressor on the cymbals, believe it or not. That's actually not doing a whole lot until later in the song. And that's simply to just kind of soften the hits of those cymbals to make them sound a little more gentle when they are struck. Everything else on this is disabled. I could go ahead and delete it if I wanted to. It's not being sent to any particular effects bus or anything like that. It's just the EQ and the compression. The kick drum, let's isolate the kick drum. Okay. I do not have a stock EQ on it, but I do have a FabFilter EQ. This is cutting a little bit of this sort of floppy sound in the mids, and it's cutting off the sub lows that were a little too boomy on this particular kick drum. The other thing I'm doing here is an enveloper. So this is a really useful plugin. It's super old, but it's actually really useful because I could mess around with a compressor and try to do what this enveloper is doing. And what that is I'm softening the attack of those kick drum hits. I can do that with a compressor, but this is way more simplistic, and it's very accurate. I don't have to worry about a compressor's release time and tweaking endlessly trying to get the perfect sound out of it. This thing will just chop down the attack on the kick drum if that's what I want, or you can increase the attack. So if you have a snare drum that's not poking enough, you can't get the compressor to give it some hit and attack and punch, you can do that too. But in this case, I'm doing the opposite. If I take this enveloper and just disable it, you'll hear what the kick drum sounds like with it on. And I'm also going to disable the room reverb to make it sound a little bit more dry. Okay, really different. It's really, really cutting a lot of that snap of the mallet hitting the drum, which is nice because that's kind of what I want for this particular song. I don't want the drums to be smacking very hard. I want them to be gentle. Essentially, all I do here is I adjust how much gain reduction the enveloper is going to apply, and the attack time is how quickly or how late the attenuation or the boost will occur, similar to attack time on a compressor. And then I've also got a room some of the other drums are being sent to as well. So it's a drum booth model. And so I'm sending the drums to that, and I'm also EQing the reverb once it hits it. I will come back to that later. I'm just going to go through the kick drum, then now the snare drum. So here's the snare. Okay, so on this, we have an EQ first, cutting some lows, cutting a little bit of this 400, 450, 500 range. We have it sent to a tape plugin. There's a little bit of saturation being added. But a lot of it also is I wanted a little bit of tape compression to further soften the snare drum hits a little bit. The speed is at 15 IPS rather than 7.5 because I did want to retain a lot of the high end of the snare. Okay, and then there's a compressor on the snare. Not doing a whole lot. I don't need a ton of compression on it. I don't want it to be sounding overly compressed. I want it to sound gentle. So maybe 1.75 decibels of gain reduction, maybe 1.5, something like that. And then there's an EQ after all of those things. Okay, so you can see where my cuts were. I did boost a little bit of the air to give the snare a little tiny bit more sizzle because it wasn't quite as much as I needed to make it sound like it fits the rest of the kit. It is being sent to that same room reverb, and it's also being sent to its own snare reverb. So I have a snare reverb or a reverb that's functioning as a snare reverb. I know it sounds probably pretty extreme, isolated, but with the rest of the instruments playing, that reverb is behind it enough to where it doesn't sound like it's crowding everything out with a bunch of washy reverb. It's meant to be pretty subtle. Next up is the toms. So you heard those toms in the very beginning. Okay, so on the toms, I've got this EQ. It's cutting quite a bit of the subs out, and it's cutting this area here that tends to make toms sound sort of cheap or boxy in a way. And it's got a reverb, and what else has it got? The room EQ, it's being sent to that as well. And then there's a channel that is just hi-hat and percussion. And in this particular case, I don't think there are any percussion elements. There's a shaker, but it's not actually part of this plugin. So I did not use the shaker inside this drum kit. I used a different shaker, but there's a hi-hat, and I think that's pretty much it, which occurs later. Let's see. Got the tape plugin on the hi-hat, and believe it or not, the tape plugin is actually, I've raised the saturation pretty high, and I've bumped the input gain on this tape plugin quite high as well, probably just because it's a fairly quiet hi-hat sound. So you don't see those needles moving a whole lot, but it is doing something. Pretty subtle. It's also being sent to the room reverb. Okay, so next thing I'll do here is show you just the drums with that room reverb isolated. Solo this.
Light in the dark until we have to go.
Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now, I do recommend using maybe sending your drums to a room of some sort, because typically in a studio, when you record a drum set, you really benefit from having a lot of different mics going on in the room if you're looking for that sort of realistic room ambience. Sometimes you don't need a ton of mics, but if you're going for that particular feel and you're doing it this way, you don't have an actual drum set being mic'd up, send your drums to a room reverb of some sort. I'm going to isolate this again and just show you how it sounds with the EQ added to it. Okay, so I just wanted to get rid of some of those sizzly frequencies on it. Now, what I did on most of those cymbal hits that occur later in the song, I have the cymbals from the drum kit, but I also have the cymbal that I showed you earlier from the orchestral kit. It's layered on top of a lot of those. And that's just giving it a little more dimension, giving it a little more, it's just adding a little bit more energy to it. There it is again. And then I've got the swell. The swell happens quite often as well. I think it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And I've got a tambourine, like you heard in the beginning. On the tambourine, it's just a reverb and that's it. And on the shaker, shaker's got an EQ on it, cutting all the lows out, getting rid of a little bit of the sizzle on the top, and then an EQ here that's doing literally nothing. So I'm gonna just disable that. That's my drum set on this particular song. So I hope you found that interesting. If you're working on a production and you want some help with this sort of stuff, or if you have a track that you've produced and you've mixed and you want the track mastered, please send me a direct message. I would love to help you out with that. I can take a listen to it, let you know if I hear anything that needs to be addressed in order to make the mix translate the best it can when it comes to the mastering stage, or if you want me to help you with the track from start to finish, produce it, mix it, and master it. That's what I'm doing right here for someone and would love to help you out. So send me a direct message if you'd like some help with that, and take care. Have a great night.